Sit comfortably with your spine straight, your body relaxed. And I find this may be useful to you before trying to watch the breathing, there's always a difficulty in the beginning of controlling the breathing. Just try to watch your heartbeat. And with part of your mind, just watch the breathing also at the same time. You'll notice it's very subtle and calm. And then slowly put all your attention on just watching the respiration without controlling it. The wisdom component of this watching should be one in which you're aware of when you're breathing in and aware of when you're breathing out. Let go of other thoughts. Don't try to force them out of the mind. Just deprive them of your attention and put that intention instead on the breathing. Be mindful of your breathing. If the word mindful doesn't have a lot of association for you, think, I'm trying to remember that I'm breathing. I'm trying to keep that in mind to the exclusion of everything else. You may find it helpful to imagine withdrawing your attention inward toward the center of your chest, near the spine, what we call the heart chakra, like a turtle pulling in its head and four limbs, four legs, away from your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body consciousness as the five senses. Just your mind being aware of the breathing. Now slowly, as you breathe in, next inhalation, imagine it going up your nostrils to the crown of your head, down to your throat, to the center of your heart, chakra, the middle of your chest, and leave your attention there. Let go of your mindfulness of the breathing, and instead place your attention on the mind itself, mental consciousness. Not your eyes, ears, not your nose or tongue consciousness, not your body consciousness. Your mental consciousness is that in which you think, you decide, you make plans, you have memories. None of those mental activities take place in the five senses. Like sitting on a corner in a Paris cafe, watching the traffic and the people walk by, but not getting up to follow any one of those cars or people that are passing. Like that, just observe the thoughts in your mind without getting involved with them. Some thoughts you may be able to recognize as memories associated with the past. Some that are with the present, maybe noting your body, pleasure or pain, or making some judgment about the present. Some may be plans about the future. You can differentiate that way. Just note them and let them go. But between the content, between the thoughts, if there is a moment of quiet, try to notice that. An open space in the busy marketplace of your mind. See if you can cause that open space to increase in duration before another thought arises. That's the quiet, clear light nature of your mind peeking through. You're being aware of it between the thoughts. Even when the thoughts are present, coming one after another, some pleasant, some unpleasant, maybe painful associations with some thoughts. Even then, slightly shifting your attention away from the contents of the thoughts to that spaciousness of the mind around them, within which they're arising. let go of the sense of your body that's being perceived by your mind, seemingly just in the background, the constant presence. You don't have to pay attention to that. Instead, focus for an instant on what you imagine to be the spaciousness of the mind within which that appearance is rising. Do that again and again as the body might appear to you again and again. What we're trying to get a mental understanding of, a mental image of, is the conventional nature of our mind. Its clear light nature. This is always here, even if our mind is imperiled with sleep or drowsiness or anger or attachment or confusion. It always has as its basis this clear light nature. This clear light nature is never stained or defiled by faulty states of mind. They're just like clouds or in the sky, or temporary pollution in the sky. Thinking that I have the capacity within this clear light nature to develop all the good qualities, eliminate all faults. And not only that, I have at this moment a life that can recognize this fact. I have a life of leisure and endowment. Being born a human with all of the necessary qualities to develop spiritual realizations, to develop good heart and patience, to develop wisdom, generosity, friendliness. But this opportunity is constantly eroding. With every second we're approaching our inevitable death. Seen within the context of what we do have now, recognizing this opportunity will not last forever, think, especially this evening, right now, I'm going to dedicate this time. I'm going to concentrate, not let my mind wander, fall asleep. I'm going to listen to the teachings on developing single-pointed concentration to enhance my meditation, to make it more powerful. It's a tool, it's a weapon to overcome my delusions, as a weapon to quickly develop good qualities. It's a mechanism to quickly develop good qualities. And doing so, not just for my own benefit, not for this lifetime, not even to escape from cyclic existence for myself alone. But my ultimate aim in doing so is to eventually become enlightened, to have an omniscient mind, to be totally, blissfully happy eternally, and to be able to spontaneously emanate manifestations to lead sentient beings, to teach them, to guide them, to be their friends, their servants, their whatever they need. I'm going to participate in the class tonight in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all living beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Ned, could you turn on the light again? Maybe Mike was still. There you go. Thanks. You see how different it is when we're meditating. This is maybe better to be able to see. How are you doing? You okay? Are you cold? Catherine, you okay?
Mm-hmm.
You got your coat on.
Yeah, I know it's this.
And Prasad, is it Prasad? Has his coat on his... We tweak it up 1 degree. Found that it did pretty good last time. We were able to get the temperature up in not too long. Thanks. Okay. If it gets too hot, it's what we call changeable suffering. Right. Okay, thanks for coming tonight. The subject that was requested is the subject of what's in Sanskrit called shamatha, Indian word. How do we say in modern Hindi?
Shamatha?
Shamatha. Shamatha, in Tibetan, we call this shine. So the etymology is clear in Tibetan. I don't know the Sanskrit well enough to tell you the etymology of shamatha, but from the Buddhist context, Shiva means tranquility or peace. Shanti, if you just took that part. Ne, in the compound shine, ne means to reside or abide or dwell. So we can call it tranquil, like the Shiva, abiding, tranquil abiding, or calm abiding. Basically, tranquil abiding is a state that we do not yet have. We have moments of concentration in our mind, but sometimes they just last a few thought moments when our mental consciousness is concentrated on something. Tranquil abiding, shamatha, or Tibetan shine, is a state in which this concentration is perfected and your mental consciousness can remain in formal meditation on one object without any distraction to the senses, without distraction to any other thoughts or worries. It can remain for, if you had perfect shamatha, for days at a time. Right now, when we were trying to concentrate on the clarity of the mind, did you notice, first of all, that's a very subtle object, so something difficult to find, the nature of the mind. But if you did get a glimpse of that, very often we lose it quickly. Our mind is distracted because it's something very subtle. Did you notice that? Maybe not. Maybe some of you have good, how about your concentration? Prasad?
I was able to find some peaceful, like when you said like see the formation of the body arising, and then so I was there somewhere, and then falling off.
Right, but doesn't last an awful, the concentration doesn't last an awful long time, right? Jody, did you have good concentration? So this is something that we need to develop, this ability to have the ability to remain in concentration for some period of time. Because this can bring about a very powerful practice. It's said that all of our practice, any kind of formal practice can be, we can think of it as having three elements. The, let's say, motivation at the beginning, why you're entering into some activity, which is very important. Whenever we enter into some activity, we should try to correct our motivation, why we're entering into it. Not just for worldly reasons, not just for the happiness of this lifetime, but for an altruistic, higher spiritual purpose. With ordinary state of mind, that kind of resolution or motivation is going to be relatively weak. With concentration, if we were to develop shamatha, tranquil abiding, that motivation can become very powerful. And the strength of the motivation will determine the weight, the heaviness of the karma that we create. Let's say the virtuous action that we're going to create. With our present motivation, it's going to be like a little bit like feather floating, in weight, Maybe not, we have a glimpse of some good motivation and then it goes. So it's not going to have the inertia to carry through our action and imbue it with this virtuous nature. If we had concentration at the beginning, it would become very powerful. The actual practice that let's say the action that we're doing, whether it be a physical action like making offerings or prostrating, or just being patient in everyday life, whatever, if we have concentration, that action can become very skillful and powerful throughout the action, if you have single point of concentration. Or say reciting mantra. Any of you recite mantras? Do you recite mantra? Someone must. Matt, do you recite mantra? Yeah, someone. What is your name?
Jason.
Jason, yeah. So sometimes people recite various Sanskrit words or phrases called mantra to concentrate the mind. It might be the mantra of the Buddha of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, for instance. And again to concentrate the mind. If you do have good concentration, that can really accumulate a very great deal of virtue in a short period of time. And then at the end of the action, whenever we finish an activity, we should try to seal that activity with a dedication. Thinking of not only did we motivate, so we created some good karma, but then to dedicate that karma to the highest goal that we can imagine. Again, if we have concentration, the dedication can become very powerful. Concentration is very important. Concentration, like developing fully qualified shamatha, tranquil abiding. That can be the cause of making deep realizations quickly when you're meditating, when you're doing, say, analytical meditation on our weekend seminar when we're meditating on the inevitability of death and so forth. Once you analyze in some way and you get a flavor of that, if you hold your mind single-pointedly on that flavor with, deep concentration, it can leave an imprint in our mind much more deep, much more profound than simply thinking about it for a short instant while the mind is distracted. Shamatha is necessary eventually to realize emptiness directly, to become an Arya being, to realize the Four Noble Truths. They all arise out of a state of, tranquil abiding like this. to develop good heart, to develop bodhicitta. There are teachings that say for an individual this lifetime to develop actual bodhicitta, to become a bodhisattva, they need to have tranquil abiding in order to, that motivation. I'm going to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, having seen the defects of working for ourself in deep concentration, seeing the benefits of working for others, having meditated on love, having meditated on compassion with a single-pointed mind, putting all these elements together, it's possible with this kind of state of mind to develop bodhicitta in one lifetime. All of the great masters of the past in the Buddhist tradition and other spiritual traditions of the East have, at one point or another, worked to achieve tranquil abiding, single-pointed concentration. It's something that perhaps right now in Washington, D.C., I don't know. Maybe there's no one in Washington, D.C. who's achieved tranquil abiding. What do you think? The bus driver, members of the cabinet? Maybe the Swami? Are you Buddhist, or are you also Hindu, or
Practicing Buddhism.
practicing Buddhism? But in the past, were you Hindu, Sikh, or Hindu? So the Swami, if there's a Swami at your temple, do they have single-pointed concentration? Maybe. Some people that have spent time, generally to achieve fully qualified, this perfect state of concentration, where you can remain in concentration for days at a time. Even if the wall were to fall down next to you, you would be oblivious of it. You know what that means? You would not notice it. Your mind would be concentrated. To achieve that state takes even in the time of the Buddha, it took many different kinds of causes to develop. And it might be achieved by, let's say, the monastics at that time, especially the monastics, because they were living in discipline of the pratimoksha. You know what pratimoksha means? Jody, do you know what pratimoksha means?
5 vows.
Pratimoksha actually means, prati means individual, also means beginning. Moksha means liberation. Notice I didn't say mocha. Don't get confused. That's a kind of chocolate coffee, right? Not individual mocha. Individual liberation, and sometimes the word prati also can mean beginning. So these are vows that one takes, orientation that one takes to develop morality to achieve liberation, the beginning of liberation, or for one's own self. This is one of the essential ingredients to develop tranquil abiding, to have some basis of ethics and morality so that one's mind is not distracted by many, many different thoughts. In the golden time of the Buddha, the monks that lived in their vows of pratimoksha, there are 200 in the Tibetan tradition, the Vinaya, the rules of discipline that have come down, there are 253 vows of a fully ordained monk. So at that time they might be cognizant of all those vows and being mindful all the time of them, so that when they sat in meditation, their faculty of mindfulness, of remembering, keeping things in mind was very acute. Also, by being ethical, their minds were calm. They didn't have worries, regrets about things that they did, and worries and so forth. So they were able, in that time, perhaps to develop tranquil abiding in a couple of months of full-time meditation, doing just a meditation retreat. Meditation retreat doesn't mean that you would have other activities. Just eating, sleeping, and meditating. In between you would rest, of course, you would walk, but You wouldn't be spending your time writing letters or reading newspapers or surfing the web or when you're trying to develop single-pointed concentration. Nowadays, it said the lamas say that a person of good fortune who has a lot of virtuous karma that they've created in past lives in this, who sets about with the proper instructions, in the right circumstances of quiet and so forth, they might be able to achieve tranquil abiding, if they were very fortunate, in just over a year. Maybe rare. I've heard of very few people that have achieved, just through this kind of method, tranquil abiding. But it is possible, and it's something that we should maybe think about. This would be a great way to spend some portion of our life. It might be a big chunk for a lot of us, a year or more. What do you think? But this is a tool. Oftentimes people go to medical school. I think medical school is one of the longer kinds of qualifications, right? How long does it take? Anyone here in medicine? Anyone know how long it takes? Do you know?
My friend took more than 7-8 years.
7-8 years. And sometimes out of the noble motivation, probably many doctors, but sometimes the motivation was to get the highest paying kind of job and, to be secure the rest of the life. But to spend a year or two to develop tranquil abiding, with it, when you think of it that way, it doesn't sound so unreasonable. That we might spend for worldly purposes 7-8 years to get a doctorate or something like that, or a professional accreditation in some, Tai Chi or some kind of healing technique or something like that. So, how does one go about developing tranquil abiding? If you're interested, I thought I was being clever by printing out the cover page of a book that I wanted to recommend to you with low resolution, so we didn't use a lot of ink. But it's called, what do they call it? Penny wise, pound foolish, or something like that. I probably could have put a little more ink on it. You can't see much. This is called Calming the Mind. I would recommend very much. This is blown up, of course. It's just a regular sized book. By a Tibetan Lama who I knew before he passed away, called Gen Lam Rinpa. Gen just means teacher. And Lam Rim, means stages of the path, but he was called Gen Lam Rinpa. That was just his given name. He was a meditator in India, in the northwest, where the Dalai Lama resides in Dharamsala, for many, many years. He lived also in other places before that. But when I met him, he was there. He had a little hermitage in the mountains with a stone wall around it. A little bit like, if any of you have seen the documentary called, what was it called? We saw the other night.
Unmistaken Child.
The Unmistaken Child, or Unmistaken Child, about Geshe Lama Konchuk. There was some video of his hermitage in, I think, in Mustang, near Mustang in the west of Nepal, with a stone wall around, and then a gate, and then within that the little stone house that he lived in. So even when he went outside, he wouldn't encounter other people. So Gen Lam Rinpa lived in Dharamsala, and he was invited to the United States by an American monk at the time, Alan Wallace, who's no longer a monk, but he's one of the translators and engaged a lot in Buddhist dialogue with scientists. And he gave, for about, I'm not sure how long it was, maybe a year, he led a retreat of Western participants and gave these teachings from his own experience, and it's very, 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 very tasty. If you get a chance to read it, Calming the Mind by Gen Lam Rinpa. So I'm going to quote a few things from that and use that as the basis for talking about a few essential points. So when we talk about developing tranquil abiding, it means that you're going to be doing something consistently in meditation. You can begin in your everyday meditation, in the morning, every day. And maybe over the course of a couple of years, you can develop a certain amount of concentration, and then at a certain point in your life, on the basis of that, you might enter into retreat, into a formal retreat, leaving the everyday activities, kind of like going into working on your PhD in tranquil abiding, okay? So there are said to be 6 important causes. One of them is dwelling in a favorable environment. So what that means is an environment which is conducive to developing single-pointed concentration. Generally, one of the thorns that irritate development of single-pointed concentration at the beginning is noise. So to find a place that's quiet. One of my Tibetan teachers, who was a great meditator in England, when he came to the West to teach, he found that even to try to meditate in the morning or the afternoon was difficult, because once people got up and there was the running water through the pipes, there was some kind of noise in the background that didn't allow the perfect condition for concentration. So he tried to do most of his meditation in the middle of the night, from 2 to 4 in the morning, something like that, when things were very quiet. So you can find a time in the morning, if you're going to meditate in the West at a certain, just everyday meditation, it's good to find a quiet time to do it. Before the activity of the days have started, before the trucks are rolling around on the street, before the birds are even tweeting perhaps, or right after the sun rises, when they've calmed down. You notice that when the sun is rising, there's some activity of the animal world. But basically, if you were looking for a place, you try to find a place which was devoid of the noise of traffic. Say if you find a house or a hermitage or something, not close to, in the West here, roads where there's the noise of cars and so forth, not where there's the noise of the congregation of people. Sometimes people think, and I've even been to a meditation center that thought it was a very good meditation center because it was right on a river and you could sit there and hear the river. Some people even have sounds on their phones, to relax. The sound of running water, on an app, help them go to sleep. It can be relaxing, and there is a purpose of meditating at a river, especially to meditate on impermanence. But generally, even the sound of a river, would not be a proper place to build your hermitage or to have it, where that sound can be a disturbance. That's why I asked us to turn off the fluorescent lights when we were doing our meditation at the beginning, to just give that extra quiet condition. So that's one of the senses of dwelling in a favorable environment. But there's others. So it should be a peaceful environment in the sense that during the day there's not a lot of human commotion, and during the night there's little noise, there's no barking of dogs and so forth. Okay, so that has to do with noise. The land, the earth itself should be a good place. Ideally where great meditators have meditated in the past and left their positive energy, but that's not always possible in the West. Maybe we ourselves might be the first ones in a long time to meditate there. So maybe we can think, with good intention, I'm going to try to bless this place for others in the future. It should be a place where the earth also is, there are no dangers of snakes, wild animals, and things that could be dangerous to your life. It should be an easy access of the necessities of life. In the past, meditators would have their hermitage in walking distance from a stream, not so they could hear it, but so they could get water. In the West here, it's easy to find houses with wells or running water. It's usually the case if you have a place. It should have access to food and so forth. If you were doing a full-time retreat, you might have an assistant that would be bringing food to you, either preparing it or bringing food to you. If not, you'd want to be within driving distance of, not so isolated that you can't get food. And ideally, it should be a place where your companions, like the sense of a hermitage would mean there might be other people within shouting distance of you. Not where you can hear the everyday activity, but if you were to fall down, you could say, "Help!" and someone would come within 5 or 10 minutes. Like-minded friends who are living in virtuous practice with a similar kind of philosophical outlook. So, not to demean the areas in southern Virginia, but not redneck country, say, where people would look at you, shake their fist or think that you're doing something weird because you're living in this little house, or if you were a monk or nun, you might be in danger of your life in certain places, and so those wouldn't be proper places. Okay, so that's one thing, the right place. In fact, amongst the Bodhisattva vows, there's a subsidiary vow, secondary vow that one is in breach of this vow if you don't make efforts to find the right conditions to do single-pointed concentration. Because it's important in the Bodhisattva path also, for Bodhisattva to develop single-pointed concentration. So that's one, the right place. And there are other things involved in that, but that's generally quiet, lack of distractions, access to food, no disturbances of other people, and so forth. Second thing, having less desires, reducing your desires and developing contentment. Now this is one of the most difficult ones to do, because when you're in retreat, if you're developing single-pointed concentration, one of the greatest obstacles is the sense of our sense in the West of busyness, wanting to do something in between the sessions, wanting to be diverted to read a book or see a video or have some interesting food or something like that. One should be, first of all, have less desires, reduce your desires for things that you don't have now. If you have a mind that's always thinking about other kinds of thoughts, I think I could, if I only had that Tabasco sauce, this would be, and then you're thinking about that and writing letters to people outside. One of our nuns, I think of that in particular because one of our nuns who had meant to do a 3-year retreat, she even built a house in India with a wall around it, and it was locked by lama and everything. And in the first week, she sent out notes to have cases of I think it was Tabasco sauce sent from Delhi. I knew at the beginning that it wasn't going to be long before she was distracted away from her concentration. So to reduce desire takes a certain amount of understanding of the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, to realize that there's nothing outside that we would desire that would be essential to our developing single-pointed concentration. It's just like recognizing we have a perfect human rebirth right now. We don't need to have a $100,000 or $1 million in the bank before we can begin to practice. We might think, I'll practice later when I get that. Our mind is always desiring other things. So you have to spend some time in preparation like this. This is an essential preparation to developing single-pointed concentration, to reduce your desires. and also to have a complementary state of being content with what you have. You know, I remember once at Kopan Monastery in Nepal, when I was a monk, new monk for a couple of years, and Lama Yeshe came to the little house that I lived in. It was what was at that time it was called the Chenrezi Gompa. I think it's been since demolished and rebuilt, a newer one. But at that time it was a small little brick building that had been part of the buildings on the land when the king of Nepal's astrologer lived there, this area, Kopan Hill. So Lama came into my room and he said, how's your room? And I said, and my mind, not content, said, oh Lama, it's right next to the bathroom. When people take showers, they don't pay attention. You know, there's. Lama looked at me at the end after this long, you know, discontent, unsatisfied mind and said, good enough, dear. Good enough, dear. Very, very powerful lesson. You know, if you're not content, just think, is this? Of course, in preparation to do the retreat, you want to make sure that you've got what is essential. There's not going to be something which is absolutely unworkable, and you know, the floors are caving in, and there's rats running around or something. You want to make sure that you have the right conditions. But once you do, to be content with that, to be satisfied with that. They have these two things. Don't have desires for things you don't have, and to be content with what you do have. Alan Wallace, who I've known for many years, who I mentioned had instigated this retreat with Genlam Rinpa, one of his life goals has always been to develop single-pointed concentration. He's been doing retreats in Thailand and other places with people. And he told me many years ago, after his own experience of trying to develop single-pointed concentration, for him this was the most difficult thing. The second point, having few desires and being content. So in between sessions, there's, like he said, there would be the tendency of not just being content to sit on the veranda and look at the trees and relax the mind, but wanting to be reading some different book or, you know, so forth and so on. Okay, second. That's the second and third. Less desire and developing contentment. So good place, not having many desires, and being content. Then giving up engaging, well, we could say, in modern terminology, you could say, not multitasking. You know, multitasking? Use that expression. You know, there was some advertisement I saw on TV the other day, some mother supposedly in the supermarket holding her baby, shopping, talking on her phone, doing many things at the same time. Maybe we feel that's necessary in the West, but in the retreat, you have to reject a multitude of activities. So, you know, not to be involved while you're doing a retreat in going out and helping in the neighborhood, or going to your brother's house to help him paint, or getting involved in church activities. You devote yourself single-pointedly to single-pointed concentration. I'll read you a little bit from Genlam Rinpoche. In general, during a retreat, a wide variety of activities should be avoided. One should not engage in business transactions of any kind. It's extremely important for ordained as well as non-ordained practitioners not to have a lot of personal contact with other people, no social activities. So generally when one does retreat, sometimes people in the West, my relatives especially, are surprised. You could spend a week without talking to anyone? Actually, you might spend 3 years without talking to anyone, without seeing anyone. In the West, people think that's really weird. What do you think? Almost sounds weird to us. We're predisposed to this. This is not a very complicated topic. We can see from experience that when we have a lot of interpersonal contact, it tends to either elate the mind or to depress it. Okay, so even letter writing, you know, other things should be avoided. That's the fourth one. So right place, less desires, contentment, reducing your activities, rejecting a multitude of activities, it says here. And then fifth, maintaining pure moral discipline. I remember my teacher Lama Yeshe, when he gave teachings about morality to the newly ordained Sangha, Western monks and nuns at one time. It was a great occasion for the Westerners because we were receiving teaching, sort of our first formal teachings about the vows from Lama Yeshe. And Lama said, many Westerners want to develop single-pointed concentration, what we're talking, shamatha, because on the basis of shamatha, with that concentration, not only can you make realizations, you can develop clairvoyance. You can have magical powers. As Genla Rinpoche jokes in the book, you can develop the ability to travel distances very quickly, maybe even, psychically. So you could, as he said in the book, you can save on bus fare. Plane fare. You can hear teachings that are being given at distant places, so you don't even have to travel there. You can sit in your room, and when the Dalai Lama is teaching in Dharamsala, and know those teachings, hear them as they're being given. So he said, with the many, and with single-pointed concentration, you can develop these, but the people don't know that want to do this, and they might want to have the energy to meditate, but they don't know the essential ingredient. That is pure morality. This point that we're talking about in this list, the fifth essential cause. With pure ethics and morality, your mind is quiet because you have avoided activities that can instigate the delusions. You avoid negative activities. You're creating virtuous karma that's a basis for developing concentration, which is what the monks and nuns at the time of the Buddha were very proficient in. Why they were able to develop single-pointed concentration well, because they kept all of these vows purely at that time. Also, in keeping the vows, keeping pure morality, one of the things that you have to do to keep pure morality is to be mindful of your vows. This term mindfulness we use in our terminology, in our meditations, but also people talk about mindfulness meditation for relaxation and for health and so forth. There's a lot of research. Mindfulness is a mental activity, a mental factor that has already experienced some object, let's say has recognized the breathing or has imagined the shape of the Buddha, and is mindful of that, keeps it in mind, remembers that. Mindfulness is the mental factor that holds that thing without forgetting it. If you're thinking about the Buddha and then some other thought comes and distracts you, and then you forget about the Buddha, you've lost your mindfulness. You have forgotten the object. Okay? So, in keeping the vows of morality, it was a natural development of mindfulness, because one had to be mindful of all the vows. Were you, getting close to breaking one of the vows? When you do retreat, it's considered very, very auspicious if you can take the precepts every day, Mahayana precepts. Or if you before you go into the retreat, if you haven't already taken vows, to take the vows of a laywoman. Do you know what the vows are? You know what the 5 vows are?
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
Not to kill, not to lie,
Okay.
Kill, lie, sexual misconduct.
Okay. Oh yeah, I should put lying over here. Sexual misconduct.
Steal.
Steal.
Kill,
Lie,
steal,
to
sexual
kill,
misconduct.
steal, sexual misconduct, lie. So those 3 are body, lying of speech. The 5th,
Uh,
Jody?
Intoxicate.
How smart she is. Not to take. So if you take intoxicants, it's very easy to break the other vows also. And can you imagine trying to develop single point of concentration if you were drunk? So it's very good to take the lay vows before you entered in, or to renew your bodhisattva vows if you've taken bodhisattva vows, and try to keep those as well as possible while you're in retreat. If you've taken tantric vows, to renew those vows before you enter in retreat, and to try to keep them pure during that time. They can be a very good basis for developing concentration. Sixth cause, so we talked about good place, what? Remember? Less desire, reducing desire,
Contentment.
being content. Less activities, so yeah, not having, a lot of companionship and so forth, or engaging in other activities, and
Morality.
pure moral discipline. Sixth one is rejecting thoughts of desire for sensual objects. And here sensual objects doesn't mean sensual in the sense that we talk about it in the West, meaning sexual, but the objects of the senses. I'll read you a little bit of what Genma Rinpoche says. The desires included at this juncture are those entailed in the 8 worldly dharmas. You know the 8 worldly dharmas? You do? What are the 8 worldly dharmas?
Attachment to praise or blame.
Attachment to blame?
Or attachment to pleasure and aversion to blame, and reputation, and sense pleasures, and what's the other side?
This is good. This is really good when we find ourselves in some sense, maybe we need to meditate on something, or someone asks us what are this list. It's good then to go back and to try to clarify it, because there are different ways to remember. Mnemonic device. You could say there's 2 sets of 4, just as you were saying. There's craving for something and craving to be, to not have that. Let's say craving for pleasure of the senses. That's essentially the main one. Craving for pleasures of the senses. We always want to have good tastes and nice fragrances and beautiful appearances and so forth, especially sensual, to feel comfortable or to have a sensual embrace and so forth. Desire for pleasure of the senses and desire to be free from what's unpleasant. So oftentimes, a lot of our time, if there's some bad sounds or unpleasant things, we want to avoid that. Those are called the 8 worldly. Those are called 2 of the 8 worldly dharmas. So we could take two sets of 4. So pleasure, material, wealth.
Oh yes.
That's usually what we think of as a source of freedom and pleasure. If you have wealth, you can fly to Tahiti and have the pleasure. You can do what you want. So desire for material and desire to be free of not having material. There's a worry. If you have money in the stock market, if the stock market's going down, you're worrying about losing your material. That's the counterpart. You've already got something and afraid about losing it. And then the last 2 have to do with more mental pleasure that we derive not from the senses but from our interpersonal relations. One is the desire not to be, desire to be famous and to avoid infamy, you might say. And that involves being known in a relatively large group. Desire to be well respected amongst your peers. Or maybe in a political sense to be world famous or something like that.
It's praise, right?
It can be praise, yeah, you can call it. And the last one is essentially a more interpersonal relationship, wanting to hear sweet ego-pleasing words and well, this is what you would be calling praise.
Oh.
Wishing to hear sweet ego-pleasing words and sounds. This one, that's on a grander scale might be fame and infamy. This would be praise and blame. Praise and blame, Lama Zopa says, more wanting to hear sweet, ego-pleasing words and sounds. We could say that sounds like praise, right? But it also means to hear the sound, to hear the phrase, I love you. Always, Lama Yeshe said that of the 8 worldly dharmas, most difficult one was to give up was that. People can give up pleasure of the senses, material possessions, and even the desire for fame, to be humble and so forth. But still they want, in some sense, we want to be important to someone else. Even our small group of hippies, Lama said, or, even society thought we were rubbish, as long as someone cared. So these are called the 8 worldly dharmas. So mainly when it talks about rejecting thoughts of desire for sensual objects, it means giving up the 8 worldly dharmas. If one's motivation for the cultivation of shamatha is the fulfillment of one's wishes just for this life, it falls into this category. So if you want to develop shamatha simply to have clairvoyance so you could show off, or you can control, you have magical powers to impress others, it's going to be counterproductive even to developing it, but it's not a proper motivation. If one aspires to attain shamatha thinking of the great reputation or financial gain one can acquire, or thinking that through the attainment of shamatha one will be able to buy a bigger and better wardrobe, or a new gourmet kitchen, all that falls into this category and will be an unfavorable motivation. Here is the essential point. The mind that attains shamatha is a mind that has gained access concentration to the first dhyana. Have you heard that word before, dhyana? I sometimes like to joke, I didn't say Diana. That was the princess of, what was she? Princess Diana.
How does that differ from, I hear like jhana with a J a lot?
Mm.
How is it different from that? Like the
Uh,
4 jhanas?
Yeah. In Pali, you know what Pali is? In
Uh-huh.
the Indian language, in India, in the ancient time, there were many dialects, just like in India now. Many of the languages that were spoken were derivative of the sort of the holy language Sanskrit. It's kind of like in Rome, in that peninsula that is now called Italy, the main language was Latin, the formal language, but there were many dialects. Romano in Rome, sort of like street language. Just like in the, here in the docks or in New York City. Hey, get out of my way! Maybe not correct grammar, just ways of talking. So there were different dialects, and the way that things were pronounced were differently. So in Pali, one would not find two differing consonants together. Like the word karma in Sanskrit, karma. We say in modern Hindi also, right? Karma. In Pali, do you know what it would be in Pali, Prashad?
Kama, right?
Kama, 2 M's. So the conjunct, these differing consonants would be replaced by the easier to say, kama, rather than karma. And there were other changes, like instead of dhyana, which is an aspirated D, followed by a Y, so D-H-Y, we would write in the West. D-H-Y-A-N-A, dhyana. That D-H is 1 letter in Sanskrit, right? Aspirated D. You know what I'm saying? Da. So in Pali, they wouldn't have those 2 conjunct consonants, so that was changed to a J.
So it's referring to the same thing?
Yeah, it's aspirated J, J-H-A-N-A. So it's the same word. So sometimes those are called, I've seen it translated as trances, trance states. Literally what it means is concentrations. Dhyana means concentration. In fact, when we talk about the paramitas, the paramita of concentration, the 6 paramitas, 6 perfections, is called dhyana paramita. Did you know that? You know maybe from the Kala Chakra 6-session yoga, when you say the various mantras, one of it is dhyana paramita. So dhyana actually means concentration in a general sense, not like samadhi, which means single-pointed concentration, but dhyana means general concentration. So, I forgot why we were talking about this.
I'm sorry, I just kind of jumped in there.
No, that's okay. What was it? What were we?
You said after the sort of get to a certain level of concentration.
Oh
then
yeah,
you
the
go
text
into-
used the word dhyana. Yeah.
Mm.
So you were asking whether jhana. So it said
You're saying something about access.
the essential
concentration.
point: the mind that attains shamatha is a mind that has gained access concentration to the first dhyana. So what does that mean? Dhyana generally means concentration, but when we talk about the various states of mind that we can achieve, our mind right now is engaged in this world system that we encounter, which the Buddha called the desire realm. It's called the desire realm because we're mainly engaged with desire for objects of the five senses. You know, beautiful sights, sounds, smells, taste, tactile sensations. It's called the desire realm. It is possible to elevate your consciousness to a state that's called the form realm. Have you heard of that? The form realm, and even another state beyond that called the formless realm. Have you heard of that before? So right now our mind, not only is our body and our life thrown into the desire realm, our mind is of the level of the desire realm. But it's possible, even though our body remains in the desire realm, to elevate our consciousness to one that's equivalent to someone who's born in the form realm. We could be born in the form realm and have a body in that realm, but the mind, in that realm, there's not a lot of moving around, there's not engagement with objects of the senses so much. The mind dwells very much in deep concentration and in a great deal of mental bliss. There are 4 concentrations, there are 4 levels of the form realm, sometimes called the Brahma realm. Sometimes those are called the Brahma Viharas, the residence of Brahma, and sometimes the 4 immeasurable thoughts are sometimes called Brahma Viharas because there's an association between the 4 immeasurables and these 4 form realms. Those 4 form realms are also called the 4 dhyanas, 4 concentrations. So when you develop fully qualified shamatha, perfect, your mind is totally unmoving, at that moment, you haven't achieved the mind of the first concentration, the first dhyana, but you have achieved what's called the preparation for that, or the access meditation for that. Just with a certain turning of your mind in the right way, you can achieve that mind of the first concentration. So actual shamatha is a mind that's separated from attachment to all of the desires of this world. If you were to achieve shamatha, and you rise from that, you are very, very calm. You would seem to be a Buddha to people. Just shamatha, not talking about developing renunciation or bodhicitta. Even having shamatha alone, you would be so far different than other people. You would be very subdued. You would not be upset by things. You would have a mind that's separated from the desire realm, but not yet the first concentration. But you would have here, he said, if one is, here the essential point, the mind that attains shamatha is a mind that has gained access concentration to the first dhyana. So you understand what that means, right? Which is included in the form realm. The form realm lies beyond the sensual realm, the desire realm. Therefore, if one's very aspiration is clinging to something that is of the sensual realm, of the desire realm, the motivation for the practice acts as an obstacle to the fulfillment of that aspiration. It is internally inconsistent. Okay? So, 6 essential causes, just to review. You want to have a proper place. One of the main things, quiet, access to food, so forth, safe, where you can continue to meditate without hindrances. Second, less desires. You don't want to be always thinking about things that you need, to be content with what you do have. Very, very important to be satisfied. Not to be engaged in a lot of activities or any other activities. And to live in pure moral conduct as much as possible. That acts as a cooperative cause. Then sixth, what did we just say? Short-term memory. Just wait a while. Wait a while. Jody jokes about her, the fact that she's losing her short-term memory. The joke is, just wait a while, it'll come back. You get it? When it becomes long-term memory, then she'll remember again. So not having desire for sensual objects. So giving up your desire for the eight worldly, the eight worldly dharmas and objects of the senses and so forth. So those are called the essential causes. Of course, one of the other kinds of conditions that's necessary is to have an accumulation of virtuous karma beforehand. So sometimes people engage in what are called preliminary practices, where they might collect a lot of merit by doing prostrations, or purify negative karma by doing vajrasattva or the confession Buddhas, and other kinds of practices, water bowls and other kinds of things like this. And then there's also the inner conditions, which are, some have included here, less desire, being content and so forth, but also having a good motivation why you're doing this and so forth. Okay, so those are some of the conditions beforehand. Now, once you have those conditions, how to start to do the meditation on shamatha. So in this context, I printed out one page from the book, and you may have heard of what are called the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes. Have you ever heard of that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you heard? Okay. Everyone's heard of this. I'm just going to leave. Okay, let me see. Between the two of you, do you know, Prasad? Anyone else know the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes? Mike?
I don't know if I can name them, but I mean, I've heard.
Oh, you've heard
I've
it. Matt, can you?
Heard teachings on it. Read about it.
So where this enumeration comes from is a text by Maitreya Buddha called the Madhyanta Vibhanga. The Vibhanga is a Sanskrit word that means analysis. Madhyanta, mad means the middle, and anta means extreme. So the analysis of the middle and extremes, to differentiate what's the middle way from what are the two extremes. Too much on this side, too much on that side. So it's a famous text that Maitreya Buddha composed in Tushita heaven and was brought to earth by a famous Buddhist saint called the Sangha. You may have heard a story about that. Anyway, in that text, this is one of the sources for this. Maitreya talks about, to develop perfect concentration, you need to overcome the 5 faults with the 8 antidotes to those 5 faults. Okay, so you said they sounded familiar. What are the 5 faults? Do you know?
The first one is laziness.
Okay, good. Good start.
Yeah. The second one is mindfulness. No.
Now we're talking about faults. Mindfulness would be a good thing.
Oh, yeah. The default. So laziness, forgetting the object.
Yeah, forgetting the object, sometimes it says forgetting the instruction. Here again, Ripa just said forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness.
First thing is laziness, forgetfulness. Second fault.
Agitation and dullness. So
Yeah,
included?
yeah.
Mhm.
The third one is the two main faults once you've found the object, which are excitement, or what did you call it?
Agitation.
Agitation,
Mhm.
which are agitation, excitement, and lethargy, you could call. What do we call it here? Laxity, or dullness. So they're in one. Then fourth fault. We're going to talk about what this means in a minute. Don't worry. Do you know? Matt? Not applying the antidotes.
Oh,
That is, if you recognize, these are faults, laxity and excitement, if you recognize them, which is one of the ways to, antidotes to them, you have to apply the antidote to them in order to get rid of them. Just recognize, just like say, oh, look at dear, there's a burglar in the house. Go back to reading the newspaper, you know. If you recognize something is wrong, you have to do something about it to get rid of it, right? Oh, no, oh dear, look at the tire is flat. Just keep on driving. You know, you have to stop and fix the tire, right? And the fifth fault,
over application.
well, application itself when you don't need to apply it. Yeah. Now let's see. So those are called 5 faults. The first fault, laziness, has 4 antidotes. So there's 8 altogether. That leaves how many, after you subtract 4 from 8, you've got 4 left. So each of the other ones have 1 antidote. The first one, laziness, has 4 antidotes. So let's go through that. What does it mean for laziness to be a fault of developing, or let's say a hindrance to develop single-pointed concentration? Laziness is a state of mind that would prevent you from actually, first of all, looking for a place, for even contemplating doing a meditation to concentrate the mind. Even if you started to engage, you know, partially in the practice, it would be a state of mind that would think, I'd rather lay down, I can do it later, all of these various things. There are different kinds of laziness. Basically, there's 3 kinds of laziness. We can say there's a laziness, well, sometimes other enumerations, but basically like this. There's a laziness that is attached to pleasure, that prevents you from doing things because you'd rather get involved with something else that's pleasurable to you. Watch TV, read books, or something like that, or eat good food, or get amused, hang out with your buddies, drink beer, whatever. There's a kind of laziness of procrastination that thinks, oh, I could do it later, putting off. There's a kind of laziness that is a sense of, well, one part of it is a kind of sense of inferiority. Maybe we could call low self-esteem. How can someone like me ever develop single-pointed concentration? I might as well give up. I've tried. There's no sense in doing this any longer because, I can't do it. That is a kind of laziness. Laziness is the first fault because it prevents us from ever starting to engage in the meditation on tranquil abiding. Okay? And we might notice laziness in our own lives, in our own Dharma practice. How can we overcome that? Here there are 4 antidotes to laziness. The ultimate antidote is something that we call mental and physical pliancy or flexibility. And that's something that we may not know exactly what that means. When you develop single-pointed concentration, first of all, the mind becomes totally serviceable, able to do whatever you want. If you wanted, there's a sense that if you wanted to count all the bricks, all of the particles of the bricks on the wall, you could do it. You just, right now we wouldn't have the patience to do that. Or the ability of mind. Our mind would get distracted and tired and so forth. So this overcomes the laziness of the mind. Also, there comes about a kind of physical pliancy after that. That physical flexibility, the winds of one's body become very supple so that you can do any kind of physical activity. You no longer feel any pain in sitting cross-legged as we do now. Many kinds of illnesses of our body that depend upon the winds of our body can be cured by that also. So that in a sense is the ultimate antidote to laziness. But how do we get that? Well, through a series of steps. Let's say the direct cause of that is perseverance in the practice that brings about shamatha. We could call enthusiasm or enthusiastic perseverance, one of the 6 perfections. How does enthusiastic perseverance come about in the practice? How can you attain that kind of, the goal is to achieve pliancy, or this flexibility of mind and body. That's the fruit of shamatha. That will completely eradicate laziness. But we're right at the beginning. It's saying if laziness is a hindrance to even entering into that, and the ultimate cure is what you get from achieving that, it seems a little bit, contradictory. So how do we get that pliancy through enthusiastic perseverance in the practice, again and again practicing until you develop that. How do you develop that kind of enthusiastic perseverance? Through what is called aspiration. Aspiration is a mental factor that's not exactly desire. You could call it desire, but not desire in the sense of attachment. The Tibetan word for desire is döpa. The word for attachment is döchak. So they're very similar. Like, what's the difference? Desires can be positive or negative. You can desire to have tea. You can desire to be good. You can desire to be famous. Desires are by their nature not necessarily virtuous or non-virtuous, but generally attachment by its nature is a desire which has exaggerated the qualities of something inappropriately, and the desire has become so strong that you're attached to it. You that which you've already achieved you can't be separated from. You feel don't want to let go of, or if you don't yet have it, you want to get it so badly. Desires are not necessarily attachment. They're not necessarily based on misapprehending the value of something. Aspiration, like to aspire to achieve, the cause of achieving pliancy is enthusiastic perseverance. The cause of enthusiastic perseverance is aspiration to achieve that. Single point of concentration. Really seeing the value of it and really wanting to achieve that. Knowing that you can achieve it. Having some faith that you can achieve it. Working for that. Wanting to achieve it. That's the cause of achieving enthusiastic perseverance. That's how you can build up your own energy. How do you develop aspiration? Desire to achieve single point of concentration? Well, you need to have a certain amount of what we can call faith. That's the cause of aspiration. Faith, sometimes we say aspiration is the mother of all energy, or all enthusiastic perseverance. There's an expression in Buddhism. The desire for something. That's, in order to make $1 million, you have to work hard. The reason that you'd work hard is because you aspire for that $1 million. If you have a really strong desire for it, you're going to work hard. Does that make sense? The aspiration, the desire, is the cause of the enthusiastic perseverance. The cause of the aspiration is faith. In this case, it's a faith, a special kind of faith that has arisen in your mind, that understands the state of single-pointed concentration is something that can be achieved. Through having read the various accounts of the Buddha and his own achievement of shamatha, the great pundits and yogis and yoginis of the past that have achieved it, having faith in our present teachers and lamas that have achieved either single-pointed concentration or something approximating that. That this is something that can be done. So having this kind of faith. So faith gives rise to aspiration, gives rise to perseverance, that can give rise to, eventually, this pliancy of mind. We, even now, even though we don't have this constant pliancy, fully qualified pliancy, that arises when we achieve single-pointed concentration, we do have moments of it. You know? Maybe even when you sit for some time, and generally maybe your knees feel pain, when you have a particularly good session, are there times that you realize you sat for a long time and you feel okay? That might be an experience of having a time when the winds within your body are very pliant and flexible. Give you an indication that you could do that all the time. You could have that experience all the time. So laziness that prevents you from not only entering into the practice, it prevents you from persevering in the practice. You know, once you start, it prevents you from achieving the end product. All of that can be overcome by these 4 antidotes. Faith in the practice, giving rise to a strong desire to achieve it. You know, seeing the benefits that desire comes about, not only from the faith that it can be achieved, but in the faith in the qualities of single-pointed concentration. With single-pointed concentration, all of our virtuous activities become very powerful. We could achieve bodhicitta this lifetime. Even the realizations that have eluded us up till now, you know, impermanence and death, even perfect human rebirth, all of these, we could achieve those realizations very quickly if we had single-pointed concentration. You know, seeing the value of that, having faith in that, then aspiring, I have to achieve that. Then putting effort into the practice, eventually developing through that effort more and more pliancy until it's actually fully developed when you have fully qualified shamatha. Okay? Makes some sense? Second antidote, a second fault. Once you have begun to sit down, how do you begin the practice of shamatha? You need to have an object to concentrate on. Now, there are various kinds of objects that can be used when you concentrate the mind. There are different categories that are given in the various sutras of the Buddha and the other treatises. One category of objects are called objects to purify afflictions. What this means is a person who is overcome by attachment, you know, very strong desires, always this very, very strong thing in their life. For that person to try to concentrate the mind on the breathing or an image of the Buddha or something like this would fall prey to this wandering mind due to attachment. So one would use an antidote to the attachment as your main object for that particular personality. It wouldn't be necessarily good for everyone. And this brings to mind, you may have heard of the famous meditations the Buddha gave on the various stages of decomposition of a corpse. You know, contemplating the decomposition of a corpse. Sometimes even for someone like that, going to a cremation ground in India. Now in the West, the cremation chamber is closed up. You don't see your grandma or your grandpa or your dog Fido or whatever that's being cremated. You don't see their body actually burning up. But in India, have you been to India? In Delhi? Where do you live? Which part?
Kanpur.
Kanpur. Have you seen cremations? Sometimes we can see in India on the Ganges. In Delhi, there's a cremation ground on the, what's it called? The Yamuna River. You can actually stand there and watch for hours the body being consumed by flames. You can think, this is what will happen to me. But also, just to see a corpse, so in that same vein, to imagine the body that you are attached to, your own or someone else's body, if it's a case of the strong sensual desire for another person, to imagine that decaying. Take that as your object of concentration at various stages, maggots and, smelling and flesh falling off and so forth and so on. Or imagine with your mind's eye the body opened up and seeing all of the organs inside it that is not as beautiful as you think. This would be the kind of object of concentration of someone who is overcome by attachment. Let's say someone is overcome by hatred. The object that they would take, rather than the Buddha or breathing and so forth, would be the state of loving kindness. Now, loving kindness is not an object that you see. It's not something that you just say, love, love, that's not meditation on loving kindness. Meditation on loving kindness comes about through analysis, analytical meditation, where you consciously bring to mind how wonderful it would be if other living beings had happiness and the cause of happiness. And you overcome the various little devils in your mind that want to say, nah, it would be okay that my friends had happiness, but only to a certain degree. But certainly my enemies shouldn't have happiness. There'd be all sorts of sort of stingy, unkind minds that we have to starve out, you might say. I heard on somewhere recently this analogy. It's like two dogs fighting in your mind. The good dog and the bad dog. You have to feed the good dog and starve the bad dog. In a sense, this is right. You have to accentuate the virtuous states of mind and deprive the negative states of mind of any of their rationale. You have to refute them. So, in developing loving kindness, you might have to spend some time to develop the state of mind that sees the truth of that, the correctness of that. If my enemies were happy, they'd no longer be my enemy. If others were really happy and had the cause of happiness, there'd be no competition. They'd be satisfied. There would be harmony. To have that kind of mind that opens up, and once you have reached that understanding, holding it single-pointedly is called meditation on love. So for the person who's dominated by hatred or anger, that would be to purify that behavior. For that period of time, at the beginning of their development of shamatha, they would take loving kindness as their main object. Does that make sense? For the individual who's dominated by too much thought, chatter, mental chatter, we technically would call it discursiveness, mental discursiveness. Always thinking, different thoughts coming, making lists, thinking. For that kind of person, the best object to take is the respiration, the breathing, which we do at the beginning, to calm the mind from this discursiveness. Because the discursive minds, the thinking minds, are dependent upon the energy currents in our body, what are called prana. Have you heard that word before, prana? You know prana, right? How would we say in modern Hindi, what would you call prana? Wind? Energy? You've heard of pranayama, maybe in yoga, hatha yoga, different kinds of breathing exercises. Prana can also refer to the breath, because it's kind of a wind, okay, energy. There are different kinds of energy currents within our body. Not the gross energies that our mind rides on, or the nervous energy that goes up and down the neurons in our body, but something more subtle that our consciousnesses, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and tactile consciousness ride on. They're like the horse, and the mind is like the rider, the cavallo and the cavaliero. You want the horse and the rider. The horse the vehicle of the mind is the wind, the prana, or in Chinese, qi. You've heard of qigong and tai chi. Qi means prana, wind, energy current. They say that within the subtle body in Chinese acupuncture, within the subtle, what do we call them in Chinese?
Points.
Various channels,
Meridians.
meridians, channels within the body, the qi moves. We would say the same thing in Buddhism. Within these various nadis, is a Sanskrit word. Like in Delhi, if you go, the canals in town are called nad, right? No? Nada.
Nala.
Nala. Nadi actually means channels within the body. So the nadis are the sort of the pathways through which the energy current moves and brings the various consciousnesses. When there's a congestion of the nadis in the body, the mind can be affected in the same way there can be a traffic jam if there's an earthquake and the big interleaf turnaround or whatever you call these clover leaf things and the big broken, then of course the traffic stops. In the same way, if you have a big chunk of your brain cut out or you have some part of your body destroyed, the consciousness is not going to be able to run the same way, but it can find new pathways. This is what we know from modern neurological research also. You can find new pathways when some of them have been destroyed or impaired by disease or other things. Through effort, through meditation, you can develop new ways. So the consciousness rides upon the pranas like this. Okay, I've gotten a little off the main topic that I wanted to talk about. Here we're talking about when you first, you have to have an object to concentrate on. It might be something that is given to you by a lama or something that you decided according to your own understanding or your liking. It might be a visualization of the Buddha, the breathing, love, decomposition of a corpse, or since there are many other kinds of objects that you can take. There are myriad number of objects. You could try to meditate on emptiness if you had a clear appearance of emptiness, but right now we don't understand emptiness very well. So it would be kind of fruitless for us to take that as our object of concentration. This is very unclear. So forgetting the object, the first fault means this. Once you've decided on an object, if you've forgotten, you're sitting there for some time and it's just like, have you ever done this? You're reading a book, even turning the pages, and then 20 minutes later you realize you don't remember a damn thing that you've been reading. Has that ever happened to you? Jason? No? Not so much. You have good mindfulness. You don't forget so easily. Do you know what I'm talking about, some of you? So sometimes in meditation, although we may think that we're meditating, we may have forgotten the object completely. Or maybe our mind is a little bit aware of it, but our mind is wandering off to other things. The antidote to that is what Gabriel was saying before, mindfulness or memory, remembering the object, keeping it in mind. Mindfulness is a mental factor that keeps the object in mind. Mindfulness itself is not single-pointed concentration. It's a factor that can bring about single-pointed concentration, can bring about shamatha. It's one of the factors that we need to not forget the object. Once you have the object, you still might be distracted. The strength of your mindfulness, the strength of your holding onto the object might be less and so forth. But mindfulness is an essential ingredient not to forget the object, not to forget sometimes it mentions in the way that is formally stated in the sutras and so forth, forgetting the instruction. The instruction means the object that you're meant to be meditating on. Okay? That's the second fault. Laziness first, forgetfulness second. Then the third fault is these two things, the two main obstacles to developing single-pointed concentration, laxity and excitement. Now, some of you have heard of this before because both of you had, is it Matt, right?
Yes.
No, forget, take me some time to remember names. I don't have good mindfulness. What does this mean? So, if we've got an object, let's say that we're visualizing this cup or this statue of the Buddha, there are two ways that our mind can degenerate our apprehension of that object. One of them is if our mind moves off to something else. Either part or all of our mental energy goes off to something else. If we go over to these, delightful marimba playing girl that we met or guy that we met in the dance studio or something, we can either be multitasking, so part of our mind is thinking of this and part of it's thinking of this. That's called subtle excitement, or subtle, what was the word you used, agitation?
Yeah.
Gross agitation or gross excitement means when you have completely forgotten this object and you're thinking, you started to think of pizza and then the best pizza's in Italy. No, it's in Chicago, but the last time I was in Chicago, completely forgotten this one. Going on some long journey. Excitement is the major kind of obstacle. There's other kinds of obstacles when you get off the object that are just simply called scattering or wandering. What's the difference? Excitement, by its definition, is a wandering or a scattering to something that's attractive. That's the main kind of scattering. You could be also, your mind could also wander into something that's unpleasant, like, oh, I didn't pay my bills, my mother doesn't love me, or my baby left me, or something that's unpleasant. But generally, that kind of wandering of the mind, because it's unpleasant, once you notice it, you can divorce yourself from it easily because it's not an attractive thought. Do you follow? Is it Beth back there? I forgot. What's your name? Yeah. Beth?
I saw you read my face.
No, I can't remember your name. Is it Beth, right?
That's right.
Okay. So you understand. So that's why we say the fault here is excitement, not just wandering or scattering in general. Although those are faults. The main kind of reason you would lose the object is because it's kind of something attractive. Part of your mind multitasking, thinking about the nice lunch you might have, or how famous you'll become, or how interesting you'll be at cocktail parties now that you have single-pointed concentration, or something like that. So that's called excitement or agitation. The other main fault of the object, even when you keep the object, you're stable on the object. You're not jumping off to something else. This is the nepa, shine, abiding on the object, is even though you've got the object, you're not holding it tight enough. It's just like I've mentioned before, the kind of experience you might have at night when you're watching TV too late at night and you're holding the clicker, and at a certain point the clicker just falls out of your hand. You were holding it before, right? You want to get the mute button, change channel, this, and then at a certain point you're not grasping it sufficiently tight. I'm trying to find my rosary here. It's also when you're saying mantra at night sometimes, if it's too late, you realize that, you're not grasping the object sufficiently. So in the case of laxity, this is the other fault, excitement and laxity. Laxity comes about from losing a little bit of the tightness of which you're holding the object. It doesn't become as clear as it was objectively or subjectively. And this is something that you can investigate over time. We don't have time now to go into the difference between that. Let's say an object can be clear objectively in the sense, let's say an object, if you're visualizing the Buddha, at first you don't have a clear appearance of the Buddha's body. It just looks like a golden mass, right? but from your own side, your mind can be very clear. The apprehension of that golden mass can be clear. So there's called an objective clarity. If the Buddha body appears clearly to you, it's called objective clarity. The subjective clarity is the strength of your mind that sees that clearly. Okay? Something you can investigate over time. You need to have both to eventually develop single-pointed concentration. So these are two faults, excitement and laxity. Laxity can eventually lead to sort of a dullness of the mind that could be called lethargy, which eventually can actually lead to the mind sinking in and becoming sleep. It is not one time that I've been in a meditation retreat and I've heard some of the practitioners, actually falling asleep. Because in meditation, when you're drawing the consciousness inward and you're not aware of that laxity, the laxity can lead about to a sort of a dullness, a darkness of the mind, and then the mind can fall into actual sleep. Now, if we had time at another occasion, we can go through more of the antidotes of these. But the next fault, so the first fault was laziness, second one was forgetfulness, the third one is laxity and excitement. What's the antidote to those? It's this mental factor of like the mental spy that we can call alertness or vigilance or introspection. Part of your mental energy has to be, say, multitasked off, has to be fractured off, and watching occasionally what the state of the mind is. Is the object clear? Am I holding sufficiently? Have I lost the object? Is part of my mind thinking about other things? That's you could call vigilance or alertness or introspection. That's the antidote to laxity and excitement. That's not the actual antidote. That is a precursor of the antidote. The next fault is non-application. That means not applying the actual antidote. Once you notice with vigilance that there's laxity or excitement, you have to apply the antidote to that. If you don't apply it, this is like the example I was giving before. If you notice that there's a thief in the house and you just say, oh, there's a thief in the house, you just go back reading the newspaper or something like that, they're going to steal all your stuff, right? Or like noticing the engine, the tire has a flat and you keep on driving. That's going to be contradictory to your achieving your goal of arriving in Toledo or wherever you're going. So you have to apply the antidotes to these. If we had more time, we could talk. Right now we're just in our last minutes of this talk. There are particular antidotes to excitement and laxity. When I say laxity is one of the very first antidotes is just to tighten up the mind a little bit. You notice your mind beginning to fade in its strength. Sometimes during a meditation session, during long retreats, you notice in the afternoon after lunch, the first session after lunch, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the mind is a little more sleepy before you've had your afternoon tea. So simply by the force of will, tightening your mind, you can overcome that tendency to fall asleep. Just that force. You could say that's one kind of antidote to laxity. Generally, what the general antidote to laxity is anything that elevates the mind. Because laxity is when the mind is beginning to lose its clarity. So to elevate the mind, to think of good things, the advantages of shamatha, the perfect human rebirth. If you've meditated on these things before, recalled your guru, different things like this, the benefits of bodhicitta that you can achieve through single-pointed concentration, the benefits of meditating on emptiness with single-pointed concentration, uplifting the mind and then coming back to the object, and you can hold it more tightly. Agitation, where you're losing the object, the mind is excited, so you want to bring down the mind. So one of the ways of doing that is to sober up the mind, to remember suffering, the suffering nature of cyclic existence. Compassion for sentient beings, the suffering of other sentient beings. impermanence in general and so forth, things that, or the negative karma that we've created in the past that we haven't yet purified, sobering up the mind, then there's going to be less tendency for the mind to be agitated. So those are the antidotes that you could be applying, just very simply. Without applying them, having recognized there's agitation, excitement, or laxity, and not applying them is a fault. The final fault is application when you no longer need to apply the application. And that's not going to take place right now. That would be on a very high level of developing, on the stages to developing shamatha. When you're very close, 8th level out of 9 levels to developing shamatha, when the mind is cruising along, it stays on the object, there's no danger of laxity any longer, gross or subtle. There's no danger of gross or subtle excitement, but still checking all the time. That energy should be invested in order to finally make the leap, to finally have perfect concentration. That energy has to be invested in the final, into simply watching the object. That's called, that fault is called application when it's not necessary, and its antidote is what's called equanimity. Here, equanimity doesn't mean the equanimity that we talk about in the 4 immeasurable thoughts. May all living beings abide in equanimity, not close to some and distant from others. It's not that equanimity. It's not the equanimity of feeling when you talk about suffering feeling, pleasant feeling, and equal feeling, neutral feeling. It's not that equanimity or neutral. Equanimity is a state of mind that no longer applies the antidote when it's not necessary. So this has just been a little bit of introduction to these factors to develop single-pointed concentration. In the future, if you have a chance to read, as I said before, I didn't print this well enough so you can see, but this is what the cover looks like, at least at one edition of it. I think it's published by Snow Lion. Calming the Mind by Gen Longrinpa. Gen spelled G-E-N. Gen Longrinpa. Very, very good. There are other books on single-pointed concentration, and if you have a chance to hear discourses from visiting teachers in the future or a resident teacher, it's very important to have the proper instructions first, and then to try to persevere in your everyday meditation, whatever it is. You can ascend various levels of shamatha in your everyday meditation. Pretty difficult, it's said by meditators, to go beyond, of the 9 levels, even to get to the 4th level. Over many years of practice daily, it's possible, but difficult. But to go beyond that, it's very difficult with other activities going on. To go beyond that, you need to go into a meditative retreat to achieve single-pointed concentration. Okay? Make sense? Everyone's alert except Catherine. Oh, go Catherine. Okay. Yeah. She looks like she has subtle laxity, but she's alert. Good for you. Okay, let's finish. It's almost time. Let's finish with just a few minutes of dedication. We tried to motivate at the beginning. We tried to pursue the activity of listening to the teachings with concentration and good heart. Now, again, relax your body, relax your mind, and just concentrate on the clear light nature of your mind. See if you can recall that experience we had. Let go of all the thoughts from your mind. Just concentrate on that substratum. And within that quiet, think, this evening I've created virtuous karma, which will definitely ripen in something pleasant within cyclic existence. Without dedicating it, it might, in the future, that pleasant experience might even become an obstacle to my spiritual path. I might become arrogant because of my my attractiveness or my wealth or my, say, high status. I might become stingy if I have wealth in the future because of the generosity that I've created and so forth. So I'm going to dedicate this merit, sort of protect it. I'm going to dedicate it to my final goal of my ultimate achievement of shamatha, single-pointed concentration based on pure ethics, to develop wisdom as a result of developing wisdom of emptiness, to develop perfect understanding of the need to work for the welfare of others, to develop bodhicitta. In this way, may I practice the bodhisattva path and quickly become enlightened as a result of the merits I've created this evening for the welfare of all sentient beings. You can think in stages. How wonderful that would be. It's right that I do that. It's right. I will do that. That's how this merit should ripen. Have an intention that it ripen in this way. With single-pointed concentration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.